All right, welcome to the NBA Big Board Locked On podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk about a few guys who decided to run it back and return to school, and also about some guys who decided to keep their name in the draft. Stay tuned. All right. Hey, first, we want to thank you for making us your first listen. Big shout out to our first time listeners, last time listeners, accidental listeners. But first, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Gametime. All right. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. So, you mentioned it, and it's crazy, Leif. Guys are withdrawing as we are recording. I know that this today is Wednesday. My days are off. I had a little power outages, so I have to look at my phone to make sure I know what day it is. But it is Wednesday, the 29th. It is the last day for players to either keep their name in the draft or return back to school. So, not on the list if you are watching on YouTube, but just in, Peyton Sanford from Iowa, he decided that he was going to go back to school. It's an interesting choice. I know he had a lot of buzz coming into this draft as a shooter. I know he didn't play particularly well at the combine. Did you get a chance to see him at the combine, Leaf?
Yeah, I saw him. I saw his shooting drills, which were, as you'd expect, pretty solid for a good shooter. But he just looked a little out of place at the combine. Shot poorly in the games and doesn't have the athleticism to kind of wow you in that side. And I thought he kind of forced some shots, and he actually hurt his shoulder. Came back in the game, and he only ended up making one kind of like running bank shot over Bona, but shot a lot and didn't impress you defensively or athletically. So I think his real make or break skill, obviously, is how well he shoots the ball. And I don't think it really made people think he couldn't shoot. But the fact he didn't shoot well, I think left a sour impression because he didn't test well either.
Yeah, you'd have to think that he's in that situation, in that setting, he has to shoot the lights out. Maybe it was nerves. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that works out for him back at Iowa, because it's like we know he can still shoot the ball. Like, he had a really productive season. I think, did he have a triple double when he had?
So.
Yeah, I think he had a triple double. So he does do a little bit more than shooting, but it'd just be interesting to see if this was like I really don't have the stock that I thought I have, or is it is the money just better in NIL? So, and I think that a lot of these guys, not just the ones that we've mentioned, but the ones that did end up going back to school, it just came down to the money situation, and I completely understand. Speaking of money, let's start off with the first guy that we do have on the list, and that is Coleman Hawkins. Now, again, I'm just reading what I see on Twitter. I know he's very active on Twitter. It sounds like his decision to return to school. Now, I know that he's in the portal, so he's basically a free agent. Is going to come down to the money. So, Coleman Hawkins, he's been an intriguing guy for years. He has a unique talent level. He is 6'10". He can handle. He can shoot. But for whatever reason, he just hasn't been able to keep his name in the draft. So he's going to go back to school. We don't know, but it looks like he's going to get paid a lot of money. What are your thoughts on Coleman Hawkins?
I was a little surprised just because I thought he played well at the combine. Like, one of the games, he had 17 at halftime, influenced the game on offense and defense, both shooting the ball well, which is kind of his big. If he does that, then there's a real role for him. And then defensively, he's switchable and he makes plays offensively, kind of initiating offense from as a big man. And so part of me thought, well, like, if there's a performance that makes you sway one way or another, he certainly was in the positive direction. But like you said, I think there's a lot of NIL, and it looks like he's transferring from Illinois as well. So he's going to find a new home. And sometimes the pastures are greener, sometimes they aren't. And I'm curious to see where he goes. I'd imagine he's going to go to a big name school who's got plenty of cash for him, because he's going to be a hot commodity as one of the better upperclassmen bigs in the country.
Yeah, I think he has to be like number one on that list as far as guys who haven't made a decision. Um, again, everybody thinks everyone's going to Arkansas now because that's where Coach Cal is, and of course they got big money behind them. It'll be interesting to see. I think he does eventually find his way in the NBA because again, he just has that talent, and guys like that size that can shoot and dribble, they find their way. Just a very interesting decision. The next person, and this one hurt, man. I gotta redo my mock now because I was really high on him, and I was really surprised. I had heard he was considering going back to school, but Hunter Salas withdrew his name from the draft. I had him in the first round. I know other people had him in the first round too, but it's surprising, but it's not, considering like everybody's 15 through 45 looks just totally different. But I was shocked to see that Hunter Salas is returning back to Wake Forest. I'm assuming he got paid a lot of money, just like most of these kids do, and ultimately maybe he thought the money from the guaranteed money going back to school was better than the I don't know what situation we're going to end up in June. So, what did you think about Hunter at the combine? Did you get to see him?
He was one of those guys that I saw less of than others. I think I was recording podcasts during one of his workouts,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I saw enough of the athleticism that you kind of see. Okay, like that guy can move. That guy is shooting pretty well. I wish he would have played in the combine, and that's why I actually thought he was for sure staying in, because if he didn't play in the scrimmage, that seemed to me an indication that he was confident that he had a promise, or that he was going to go first round, because he felt like a guy that could improve his stock, having the ball in his hands, knowing how to score when there's unfamiliarity. So I was a little disappointed he didn't play, but I guess maybe he was weighing this option more seriously than I thought. Uh, I guess I'm not stunned, but I'm a little surprised considering he didn't play at the combine for better or worse in terms of the scrimmages. Didn't see him do too many of the drills that you saw some prospects do that were more basketball oriented than just athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like that was like, hey, I'm protecting my stock. I got nothing to show. They show, like, basketball film will show I'm a good player, and my athleticism speaks for itself. So that was one that shocked me more of the returners. Like Hawkins, I thought he could have gone because he performed well, but doesn't shock me at all because he's got a huge asking price. Salas coming back was a little bit of a shocker to me.
Yeah, that was like you said. It was. I thought he had a guarantee because he wasn't as active. But hey, I hope the best for him. It's a risk because he played the jump that he made from Gonzaga to Wake Forest was just huge, and it's like it'd be interesting to see how he's evaluated as a senior versus as a junior. Like, is he going to be able to keep those strengths sharp? The shooting, like, it made a big jump. Um, So before we go to break, let me talk about one more guy who I wasn't surprised with his decision, and that's Mark Sears. I know he didn't measure well. I mean, it was kind of expected. I think he was like sub 6 foot barefoot, and that's always going to draw issues, especially in today's NBA. But it's good news for Alabama fans because they brought back a lot of guys and they added guys. So they're going to be really, really, really good. It'll be interesting to see what Aiden Holloway does because I don't understand the decision to go to Alabama, but hey, maybe he re-enters the portal. Um, I do not know, but Mark Sears, surprised about that decision?
No, I expected him to come back. He was a guy that entering the draft, I thought, got a lot of hype because they made the Final Four, and he got these, in my opinion, erroneous comparisons to Jalen Brunson just because they have a similar complexion and they're both left-handed, but I don't think they play all that similarly. Like, they don't change speeds at the same way. They score in different facets, even from same areas. So I think he got this like boost in terms of perception, but not in terms of his actual basketball. He didn't test very well athletically, which was no shock. And I really think that going back pays him just as well, if not better, at Alabama, and the team has a chance to be number one in the country. And so I felt like, from a collegiate, like a fan of college hoops, it made a ton of sense to come back. And he felt like one of those guys is like, well, you know what? Like, how much is my stock going to change from this year to the next year? I'm already old. I'm already skilled as a shooter, but like nothing's going to change. So this is the one that I feel kind of the least shock about. I actually talked to Richard and while we were there, and I was like, well, I think he's going back. So it's funny he's testing right now because I thought scouts were viewing him relatively negatively for in terms of his NBA draft day pick range. I kind of felt like he was bordering on the undrafted side. So I told Richard right then and there, I kind of thought he was going back.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Like he's a college basketball player, and there's really nothing he can do to improve his stock. Again, if he makes it, he's going to make it. It wouldn't the combine wasn't going to change. All right, before we talk about the next guys in our next segment, let me tell you a little bit more about the Gametime app. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So, hey, Leif, I'm in Dallas. I would, love to go to a Mavs game if they take care of their business and beat the Timberwolves tomorrow. So if I do decide to go, I definitely will try to use the Gametime app because again, the last minute deals you can save up to 60% off of buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and etc. They also have flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And they have zone deals where I could save even more when I choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. So, hey, take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime today app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, before we took that break, we had mentioned that there was a few other guys who were on the fence and they made a choice. This one was interesting. I'm not surprised that he went back to school. I think he did get good feedback at the combine because he's very, very, very talented. He just can't shoot right now. And that is Gary Dual, who was at Providence. So similar to Coleman Hawkins, I think he is going to be highly sought after in the portal because Gary Dual can play, and eventually I think he will be an NBA player. He just has to shore up his shooting. I think he's about a 6'5" guard. He's extremely long. He is tough to get by. He is a great defender. He has one-on-one creativity, just all the skill in the world, but he's just not a shooter. And if he gets into the right situation where he can develop, work on that jump shot, he, to me, has an opportunity to be a first-round pick next year. And that's even with the 2025 draft class being much stronger on paper than the 2024 draft class. What were your thoughts on Duval when you guys got to see him at the combine?
Yeah, he's another one of the guys that I saw less of. He performed more at the G League Ignite camp, and I arrived the night that finished. But overall, I think you're spot on. He doesn't shoot the ball well, and in today's age, no matter how long you are defensively, at 6'5", you need to be able to shoot the basketball. And so that's really it. Like, it doesn't matter if he goes back to Providence for Kim English or if he goes to Kentucky for that matter, and he just needs to shoot the ball better because he's got all the attributes and measurables you could ask for a player. He even gets the rim well, and I just think he has to shoot the ball, and then that'll open up more and more. So his finishing, which I would say is still probably an overall strength because he gets there, will become better because he'll be able to get there more easily than have to kind of ram through people or have these clever finishes. I think he'll be able to set it up with pump fakes if he starts knocking down some jumpers.
Yeah, he's extremely talented, man. And like if he just shot the ball just a little bit better, I think he would have been able to stay in this draft for sure because he checks so many boxes, and he's going to be, when he does get that opportunity, he's going to be like a very, very, very good on-ball defender because he uses his length, he gets steals, like he's really tough. Next person on our list I have is Cam Christie. He has been a draft riser. He is the younger brother of, what's his name? I don't want to call him Doug.
Max Christie. Max Christie.
Max Christie.
They look identical. I saw him walk by, and every time I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like that, it's uncanny. And obviously they're brothers, but like this is copy and paste.
Yeah. Like That's funny coming from a person who has two brothers who resemble each other. Like they really, really look alike. But Cam Christie, sharp shooting guard out of Minnesota, he is not going back to school. He is keeping his name in the draft, and I am not surprised. He can shoot. He fits the mold of the 3-and-D guys that you would like. I know he's on the thin side, but he has a lot of talent. I personally have him in the early 30s on my mock, and maybe with some guys pulling their name out, maybe he finds his way in the late first round. I wouldn't be surprised, but he can shoot the ball like really, really well. He can shoot it off of movement. I think he's got a lot of talent, and I think he actually made the right choice because in this draft of uncertainty, like I kind of feel like you might as well strike while the iron is hot. What are your thoughts on Cam Christie?
Yeah, I generally agree. I think his shot looks really pretty, and it's kind of been streaky at Minnesota. Like that when he played well, Minnesota was a significantly better team under Ben Johnson. And like for those of you who follow college basketball or don't, the picture to paint is they lost a lot of talent. Like most of their best players transferred the last few years. Like if you remember Marcus Carr at Texas, well, he was at Minnesota. A couple of their other good players left. And this year they had a bit of a rebuilding year, but they had kind of a raw, young roster that was starting to piece it together at the end of the year. And if the year had started maybe February onward, that was probably a tournament team. And I think Christie's emergence really made them significantly better because month to month he got better. And when he shot well, Minnesota was a difficult team to beat, especially at their home. In a similar way to his brother, where his brother scored about 10 a game for Michigan State. I saw it like, hey, these are the flashes you're going to see. And I wish he went back to Michigan State and had a sophomore year, and you got to display his skill set more than just playing a 3-and-D role. I wonder if he played more maybe the next year. Speaking of Cam in this case, I wonder how many points he would have scored and how much his stock would have risen because, like you said, maybe he can take advantage of a relatively barren cupboard in terms of talent this draft, especially shooting later in the round. But I think he's a little unproven. He's a little bit of projection, but the traits are there. He's long, he's kind of wiry and quick, and the shot looks even better than the percentages, which were respectable.
100% agree. Like I said, he has talent, and who knows where he ends up. If he's at 27, 28, I mean, like a team like Denver, for example, who, you need shooting off the bench. And with guys like Brown and Peyton Watson, like they're not making the defense respect them. And ultimately, not to say that they cost them, but in general, Denver's depth cost them. And it is a lot to ask for a rookie to contribute on a team that should be championship aspirations every year, but they need to shore up their shooting. And eventually, whether, the salary cap does its thing or not, they're going to need some young guys who can shoot. So again, I like Cam Christie. I like the choice. I feel like a couple of the guys probably should have made the same choice, but hey, he made his decision. So before we get to our last segment, let me tell you about the Locked On Sports Network. So are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for your everyday to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Sports Network. Your team every day. So the last segment we talked about, really the last two segments, we talked about guys who were going back to school, and then we mentioned Cam Christie, who is keeping his name in the draft. Next up, we'll talk about two guys who are keeping their names in the draft. To me, no surprise with this first one, Deron Holmes II. I don't personally know why he even flirted with going back to school. I think he's ready. I think he's really good. I have him in the top 20. I think he could be one of the better bigs in this draft, and he brings a lot. I think he can be a rim runner and potentially a floor stretcher at the 5 position. He's a little on the thin side, but I thought I saw somewhere he put on a bunch of weight. I didn't get to see him in person, but I think he's a first-round pick, and it should be a no-brainer. Like the production's there, the talent's there. What really sold me was, again, it's not just one game. All the talent was there, but like he really got what he wanted against Arizona. and he was beating like highly touted defenders off the dribble, which is a plus for somebody who projects to be a five, in my opinion, because if you want to play five out, or if you want him to be a pop guy, he can do that. He can put the ball on the ground. I think he's a pretty good passer, at least out of double teams. And I kind of feel like that should be able to translate. So I'm all in on DaRon Holmes a second. What are your thoughts, Leif?
I'm actually pretty out on him, and I actually was at that Dayton, Arizona game. So that was in my backyard.
Always disagree. What's going on, Leif? Talk
Okay,
to me.
so here's the part where I would pick a bone with. I think he's a 4 rather than a 5. And so if you alleviate some of the worries about in terms of like he doesn't change ends of the floor at all, he kind of lumbers, in my opinion. He lumbers and trails plays, and every single play they run is a pick and roll in which he kind of backs into the guy behind him, and it's not like an actual roll. And then they keep the ball on one side of the floor. This is more of a Dayton coaching issue, so I was certainly not surprised that he left. I thought he would because they were losing their talent. Kobe Brea was a highly sought after transfer. Nate Santos was a transfer. Their guards were not very good, so I thought he was gone. So not about that. But in terms of my evaluation of him, I think for him to be a 5, he's not that good of a rim protector at the NBA level. He relies on smarts and intangibles, but he's not like a very twitchy athlete. And if he's a 5, then his shot that's kind of slow and methodical doesn't bother me that much. But I see him as a 4, and he's a 4 that doesn't switch directions of the floor. He doesn't rim run, nor is he that great of a shooter. So if he's a 5, I can buy it. But most people I've spoken to see him as a 4. And if he plays the 4 in the NBA, I'd be pretty shocked at a high level, that is, because like you think of players that project as the type of shooter he is, which I think is an okay shooter, but it's because they want him to shoot catch and shoots, and he does it slowly, and they'd rather have him shoot that than post up in college. Well, the players like that I think of that are like that play the 4 effectively typically are like energy, rim running, freak athletes. Like think of Jared Vanderbilt or someone who just runs and hounds you defensively. DaRon Holmes is viewed as a good defender in college basketball because he's a rim protector. I don't think he rim protects at the NBA level very well, and I don't think he changes ends of the floor very well. So that eliminates him from the 5 and the 4 for me in terms of being like at the level of being a starter. And there are some people I talked to that project him to be a starter or like a lottery pick, and I like the logic of he's a heady player. He's a wonderful person. Like I saw him hugging people that weren't even like related to him, just Dayton fans. And I was like, man, that's awesome. But I just don't see that the pathway being very clear. Like it would take a really specific type of role in a specific situation of team that would best utilize his skill set. And I typically like to look for players that are projectable to more roles. They have more role versatility.
Interesting. See, that's the thing. I never thought of him as a 4. Like I think he's strictly a 5, and like he does lumber, and his shot is slow. And when I think of like lumbering, it's kind of slow, but kind of stiff, but some kind of still like athletic, I think of like Al Horford, right? Because he moves at Al Horford pace. He's not an above the rim athlete, but he gets the job done. You're gonna make me really dig into his shot blocking, rim protection, and because I always liken him to like a skinny Al Horford again, not maybe the old skinny Al Horford, because Al is a little older, he's about my age, right? But I'm going to dig into his rim protection to see if that's an issue. If we're gonna have to disagree on that, but I think he's a 5. I want no parts of him at the 4. Because I don't feel like he has any advantages at the 4.
I agree there. I just think most people see him as a 4 that I've spoken to.
Really? That's interesting. Like I see no parts of a power forward to him. Because to me, like today's power forward, either you're like transcendent power forward or borderline all-star power forward, the Giannis's, then we could go down to the next level of like Paolo. And then we got a bunch of guys who are small forwards playing the 4.
I totally agree. Like the 4 position
has
changed more than any position in the NBA.
So, and that's why I want no part of him playing the 4, because I rather just have the young athletic guy who is going to be able to, pick and pop or be an athlete. Like today's 4 is PJ Washington for your average 4, minus like your superstar or your all-stars. I don't call them superstars because they're not superstars, but like, is Giannis, Durant is a 4, LeBron is basically a 4, and like I don't want him guarding those guys. I want him guarding 5s. But if we have an issue with him blocking shots, maybe it does put a limit on what kind of 5 he is. I don't know. We'll have to see. That's interesting, man. Me and Leaf usually see eye to eye on these things. So
the thing is that like he's kind of a ground bound rim protector, even in college. Like he does his work early, which I actually appreciate. Like he's a heady player, knows where to be. But I think that's partially because of the system Dayton plays is heavily reliant on him to like tell people where to go and they funnel it into him. If he's a drop big in the NBA, which I think he will because I don't think he's the foot speed to switch or hedge, then I don't think he's got the verticality and to impact those drivers that would be funneled toward him at the NBA level, and nor the agility to step up and influence the teams that actually will shoot those mid-range shots. So that's why I think he would have to play the 4 in terms of like, I don't think he rim protects, but like I said, I have no want to see him change ends of the floor and be one of those twitchy. Like you talk about PJ Washington, who's not like Paolo or those guys who have the ball in his hands, but the dude runs up and down like a gazelle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's
he's PJ's guarding threes, so he's athletic. Yeah, he'll guard 2s and 3s. Like they're asking him to switch with Derrick Jones Jr. off and on the best wing. So like, I don't want no parts of Deron Holmes at a 4.
I mean, I'm with you there, but that's part of the reason I have concern.
Understood. All right, this last guy is kind of surprising that he kept his name. It's surprising, but it's not surprising because of the particular draft that we're in. But Johnny Furphy kept his name in the draft. Johnny Furphy had a scorching hot segment when Kevin McCullough went down. I don't have the notes in front of me what particular month it was. I want to say it was in January.
I think it was late January, early February.
He shot the lights out, and it was at like 60% over like 8 or 9 games from 3, and it wasn't on like 1 or 2 attempts. Like he did a lot, and he cooled down. And he has, if he could have declared February the 2nd, he would have easily been a first round pick. But as the season, got going, and I guess the film got out, he's not a shot creator. He is limited, very limited off the dribble. The 3-point shot cooled off, and then I'm not personally too big on like, I get the measurements. I think measurements matter by position, so I really don't care what my point guard's wingspan is because it is what it is. I found something on Twitter the other day where the top 5 finishers in the NBA, 6'2" and under, were like Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving, Jalen Brunson, like all guys with just normal human being wingspans, average wingspans. So I don't care about your wingspan as a point guard. But as a small forward at 6'9", I think you need to be +3, +4. And I think he was like +1, if that. So like I have my concerns about Johnny Furphy. And again, I get the choice, I get the decision that he made because the draft is, he could be a first round pick in this draft, and he goes back to school. And we come to find out he can't dribble, or maybe he's not the shooter that we thought he was. I get it. What are your thoughts on Furphy?
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy that I saw in Salt Lake actually at Madness, and I was pretty impressed with his fluidity as a mover. Like he looks like he moves like a 6'6" guy that happens to be 6'9". So I think, while you bring up a valid point, I agree. The positional wingspan, like I don't care about my point guard's wingspan. I honestly don't care that much about my shooting guard's wingspan. It's like the center, even if they're big, like it helps that they block shots, but I don't care about their vertical jump if they're tall and they like clinging. So sometimes that people get all like into these numbers and say, well, this guy did this and he's the archetype. Well, I say all that to say this, like he's 6'9", and he plays that way in terms of the way he tries to get after the rebounds and contest shots. He's just not quite fluid around using his body, but his legs move like he's 6'5" in terms of like he runs that way. He acts kind of young in the sense, like a kind of baby giraffe type of way. But I buy into his athleticism, turning him into a decent defender, even though you would say like, oh, his hips don't look super great. He doesn't navigate screens very well. I think he's raw in that department. And so his lack of length, like, yes, you're not going to grow your wingspan very much, I think doesn't matter as much because he does a lot of the intangible things that being 6'9" allows you to do. He crashes the glass. Yes. He runs out. He uses his length nicely at the rim, extends for finishes, and has a really high release. So I kind of think I was in the minority on this one. I thought he was going to go to the NBA because Kansas brought in 4 transfers that were paid $1 million+ bucks. And so I kind of felt like it would be a logjam if he went back. So I had a backwards logic, and I was like, well, he might as well go, especially because the draft's not loaded. So that was kind of the way I viewed it. And I think he'll end up going in the top 25.
I respect it. I think I had him at 17 at one point. He cooled off, and I have him at like 28, 29. I think he has an opportunity to be a first round pick. Like I said, I wish he would have been a little longer, but you know what? Wingspan aside, he rebounds at a high level. And it's like, again, we cover the draft, but I don't know what Josh Hart's wingspan is. I don't even know how tall Josh Hart is. He's like 6'4", allegedly, but you know what? He rebounds like he's 6'9", and that's really all that matters. All right, so this last part, before we wrap it up, I'm going to ask you a question. If you, Leif, the basketball player, are you see your name on mocks and you see between 20 and 40, what decision would you make? Stay in the draft or go back to school? And let's say you're a junior.
Okay, yeah. So the age matters. And then it kind of, I guess the other thing that would matter is the type of school that I go to, one that'll pay me a boatload. And then obviously you could go to and obviously you could transfer, but like if you're at a Kentucky, let's say, or one of those ones, like Kansas would have paid Furphy a ton. I think that's the type of player that needs to go and play at the combine. If you play well, then you go. And if you don't, then you come back and you say, well, here's my safety net. This is what I want to work on. And if this team, your collegiate team, doesn't have the capacity to like put you as a different position, if that's what the evaluation is, then you transfer. But I think you can work on your game proactively if you perform poorly in those combines. So that's why I kind of was shocked about Salas not playing. It made me think he had a lock. I think if he'd played, he would have stayed because he would have impressed. I thought Samford, I kind of thought he was going to leave, but may transfer because Iowa doesn't bring back much talent because he played poorly and frankly looked out of place. So I think that would be the evaluation tool. And that's the type of player that should play 20 through 40. And too many of the players I thought hid from the competition. Like, for instance, Deron Holmes, he's going out, but he didn't play. I think he could have helped or hurt himself and made it more clear. And I actually think it was smart he didn't play. Like I said, I have my concerns about him. But that's the way I evaluate that type of decision that has to be made. I think performance has to factor in a little bit.
I think Holmes, I'm just going to speculate that he's got a guarantee.
I bet he does too.
And he was not going to risk anything because you know what? I think he has a guarantee. But to flip the question on me that I asked, in this particular draft, would stay in the draft if I felt comfortable about my game. Because I look at guys like Terquavion Smith, right? He went back to school because they said he wasn't efficient and his team didn't win. Well, he came back, and I don't think his efficiency improved all that much, and his team won a few more games. I think they asked him to play point guard, and I think it didn't help him out. I think he would have been drafted had he gone the year he initially had planned to. I think, in particular, this draft, I think you roll the dice on yourself because 2025 is a stronger draft, and it's like they're going to nitpick you when you do come back. Because if you shot 38% from three this year and you go back to school and you shoot 34%, they're going to be like, well, is he really a shooter? Now, again, Devin Carter is not in that situation, but imagine if Devin Carter wasn't confident about his draft stock and he decided to go back. And then, you know what, now you're 23 and you didn't shoot as well. And, you know, your coach wants to win, so he's not going to necessarily put you in the position for the team for you to get better. He's trying to win games. So me personally, depending on some of these guys, I think I would have stayed in the draft. I get the money is very, very, very intriguing. And then, you know, hey, if I'm 19, 20, 21, and you say, hey, man, I got $2 million, you go back to school, I totally get it. But it's like if you end up landing 31, 32, and you still secure that guaranteed deal, you get to get better on NBA time. You know what I'm saying? You'll end up in the G League, but every day in practice, when I do get my time in the big league, I'm going against great players, you know? So that's just my personal thinking. Hopefully everyone in the draft who stayed in the draft made the right decision. Whoever went back to school made the right decision. But hey, that wraps up our time. Again, very, very appreciative of your listen. But again, before we go, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. I'm James Barlowe. That is Leif. We are out.